ready to get started?
Oh, sure. Oh, you're actually doing this.
All right. Good morning, Jeff.
Well,
How are you today?
good, good.
Good. Glad to see you have come back and are looking to sort of continue with some work. As we get to know each other a little better, I'll be repeating some things, such as the forms that we went over and talked about confidentiality and reasons I may have to break that confidentiality. We talked about that in our first session.
Yeah.
And do you have any questions about that?
No problems.
Okay. It's important to know too that if you do have any questions, you just sort of interrupt and feel like you can jump in at any time, because your comfort is obviously very important here. And so a part of the process that we're going through today is more information gathering. Obviously, the better I know you, the better I'm able to help you. And so I'll be asking a variety of questions and so on to sort of dig a little deeper than we did last day. It's some of it may make you, like I said, feel a little uncomfortable, but we'll go through and see how we do. Like I said, if there's something you're not comfortable with, just let me know. Okay. All right. So first of all, let's give me a reminder. What was the main reason you were coming in?
Yeah. Like I said last day, I've never engaged in counseling before. So the reason I was coming in is it was suggested by a good friend of mine. Just they've noticed that I've went through a lot of change in the last few years, just with moving away from my family, moving away from my community, moving home from Alberta to here, home, Nova Scotia, has been quite a shift. We've moved into a community to which my wife is from, but I know no one, so it's been an adjustment there. And just as an only child within my own family, as my parents get older, I start to feel a responsibility to be there for them more.
Right.
And I think that's putting some guilt on me that I don't get to see them as much. Within the last couple of years, my mom recently lost her mother, so my grandmother, who brought me up from when I was a year old. She lived with my parents since I was a year old, so that's been a big change for our family. It's like my parents don't know how to live kind of without her being there.
Right.
So they're learning to kind of live together again, and I just feel like I should be there to help, but I'm guessing, I'm hoping therapy or, this counseling, some of the things we can talk about can bring some light to what I'm actually need to do or what I'm actually feeling.
Okay. Yeah, and so certainly a lot of change over the last 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah. Well, definitely 10 years. I feel like I'm a teacher, so I've been teaching for 10 years now, and through those 10 years, I've moved out west and gotten married and done all those things. So definitely been a lot of change the last 10 years, and now that things are starting to settle, I'm having a hard time settling with them, I guess.
Right.
Till my feet actually hit the floor, and I'm not sure when that'll be, but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so certainly a lot of change in your life and a lot of potential, I don't know if you used the word disruption, but certainly a lot going on. So, okay, well, let's get to some of these questions. Some of these questions might seem strange, they might seem a little out there, but like I said, we're just trying to look at all avenues and to help sort of really focus where I can help you most, because that's why we're here. So, do you find that you're someone who could potentially, gets upset with this issue of not being able to see your parents as much? Is it something that you sort of gives you, puts strain on your relationship, or something that makes you sort of unregulated, I guess?
Yeah. Every so often I do find myself, if I would have put it on a timeline, probably once every couple months, I'll feel a little resentful towards my wife in a way that, like, we bought a house, one house away from her parents, so
Right.
we see them every day.
Right.
But then it'll come for a weekend where, you know, my mom will invite us up for supper or for whatever, and it's always seems like such a big deal, right? Like, oh, we got to plan that, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to drop everything. And I get a bit resentful because, and I think I take some of that resentful and that turns into like a little bit of anger, and then I take it out on her. So it does bother me in that way that, like, we can't go see my family for an afternoon and we see hers every day, right? So I think that's where the balance, and I know deep down I shouldn't take it out on her because, like, I've made these choices with her to live that close to her family and move to her community, but at the same time it just feels like I'm not, from her end, I'm not getting enough on the other side, like the balance of it.
Right.
But I think I'm slowly learning to see from her perspective that, like, you know, even though my family's only a couple hours away, like, it's not just, we can't just walk across the road, and it does take some planning, it does take some understanding. But I guess to me it should just be immediate, like, yeah, sure, let's do it, but
Right.
it's always a big thing.
Right, it's always a thing. And so anger comes from sort of two places within us, you know, sort of a sense of envy or a sense of injustice. And it sounds like there might be a bit of both in that situation, where, you know,
Probably more injustice, I feel.
you know, and so if you have this sense of injustice that is making you angry, would you say you get quite angry when you do, or is it like on a scale of 1 to 5? Would you, sort of 5 being the most angry you've ever been, sort of 1 being mildly irritated and angry, but still different than just an irritation, like spilling your coffee or something? Where would you rate that?
To myself, I think it's only like a 3, because like you said, that 5 is kind of the most angry I've ever been. To me, it's only a 3. I think to my wife, or maybe to other people, if they saw me at a 3, they would think I'm more angry than I actually am, because they're not used to seeing me angry.
Right, you're a fairly mild person.
Yeah, most of the time. So when they see a 3, they think, oh man, he's mad. But to me, it's not. I'm just trying to express my opinion in a way that you're not used to, and it looks like anger.
Okay.
But it's like, I feel like I've tried all the other ways. Like, I've tried to be nice about it. I tried this. And then it gets to a point where you get to that level 3, we'll call it anger, I guess, and then it looks very direct and stern, and so yeah, I'll go with a 3 from my own perspective, but to others it might look higher than a 3.
Right. Okay. And I think both are valid, because the perception of it to other people is what they're perceiving.
Exactly.
And then what you're actually feeling is also just as important, because you want to make sure that if this is something that you're expressing, it's the true self. And hopefully we'll continue with the information gathering. But this justice thing, I think, is something, and potentially envious of the relationship that she has with her parents, opposed to the ability to have that relationship. That's something I think we should delve into as well. And you say you probably get angry once a month, like every couple of weeks. It's not a daily, multiple times a day.
Sometimes it's usually around like major holidays and stuff. Right. Like when those
A
are
sensible time
long
for that to come up.
weekends and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So, but you wouldn't feel like it's something that it has dissipated. It's still a continuous issue that you might want to deal with.
Yeah, like every month I feel more and more grounded in where we live and our situation.
Okay.
But that's still sitting in the background and still a thing. Right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, we'll have a look at that. Do you find this anger comes up around any other issues, like where you might get elevated? Like, say, we talked about your work as a teacher. You've mentioned it today. You mentioned last day you do work in a high sort of stress environment. It's a unique situation, working with students with learning disabilities and so on, and behavior can be sometimes an issue. do you find that the anger that you express with your wife is the same as anger if it happens at school?
No, I think I consider school a very, like work a very, I don't know, a place I can kind of go and be who I want to be as a professional and be who I want to be with the people I will work with. I think a lot of those, like you said, kind of that injustice part of things are not there. Now, the longer I work in a school and you build relationships, those might come. But I'm not seeing it really in any other areas. Like I think the focus of where I work now, so I've recently got a job closer to home, which has taken some stress off me and my wife, I think, because neither of us wanted me on the road in the winters and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But taking that away has also added to where I used to work was only 15 minutes from where my parents live. So it gave me another good reason to go visit them more, or for them to come meet me somewhere in the middle. So taking one stress away kind of added to another problem or another issue that I'm currently having. So there is a work aspect to it, like the geographical location of work has kind of taken away from one thing and added to another.
Right. So you have more time, but that time now might not get spent with your parents, which it did before.
Exactly.
Do you feel that is something that might make you angry at work because of that? Like you're angry at work, or is it still mostly focused at the home environment?
I think it's mostly focused on the home or when I'm talking to my family on the phone, like, because sometimes I only have like a 15-minute drive to work now, 15-20 minute, and I'll call my mom or whatever. And
Right, yeah.
most 9 times out of 10, it's a positive conversation with my mom. What are you doing, blah, blah, blah. But then there's those other ones, well, she'll, make a bit of a dig that like, we're doing something this weekend, but you probably won't come anyway or something like that.
Right.
And so then that's kind of like, right,
Yeah.
that part of it. So it's
Yeah.
tough.
Well, and I think too, anger is natural, anger is normal, and I think it's important to understand though that these feelings are not something that you particularly want, but I don't think that we should be ashamed of them either. And so it's, we have a cause potentially, and as we look at potential reasonings for that, maybe this being more opportunity to see your parents might help with that, but just looking at the anger right now and how it presents itself is quite important. So I think we've seen that at work, you would say not as much. Home, definitely an opportunity where you feel maybe more comfortable, more yourself, can release some of that, maybe in the car ride, you bang your fist against the steering wheel, stuff like that. Anything like that happen, do you think, or is it just kind of generally?
I think initially when these things happen, it's anger at the beginning, like even the first 30 seconds. Like when a pot shot gets made, or when my wife makes a big deal of going somewhere, 30 seconds to a minute, it's like, what? And then it quickly turns into something else, like guilt or sadness or whatever. Because I don't hold on to the anger very long. It's definitely anger at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what do you mean? Because it's something not going the way you think it will go or you want it to go.
Well, there's that feeling of injustice or anything.
Exactly.
Right.
But then that wears off quickly for me because I think I care about the other person on the other end, so I care about my wife or I care about my mom, right? So, if my mom makes a pot shot, it's anger at the beginning and then it turns into like sorry or whatever. I feel the guilt of it. And same thing with my wife. It's like, blah, 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 why? And then you slowly get it, like you worked all week. Probably the last thing you want to do is drive 4 hours in a car or blah, blah, blah. Like I start to understand it, but it doesn't take away from the initial feelings that I had. And I think that's what I'm struggling with, I guess.
Yeah, I think that that it's family. It's a passionate thing.
Yeah.
So certainly that there's going to be a lot of emotion attached with it, whether it be anger or guilt and so on. Those guilt feelings are important. That we look into those as well. But you say it doesn't last long. This isn't something that you would, the anger, would you consider that you, and not just the initial anger, but so that initial anger that you said goes away quickly. But do you feel the sense of anger, it's just kind of getting buried, or it's, I don't want to sort of lead you, but the idea of it hasn't gone away, you've decided to come in.
Mhm.
How's this anger look, do you think, as far as you expressing it? Is it a short-term thing, doesn't go away, you hide it,
Yeah.
that type of idea?
There might be a barrier aspect to it, but I think over time I've learned to switch the emotion. I think like I'm not bearing it as much as I think I am, because I know deep down that the people saying this to me are not, like my wife and my mother are very much in the same, that they're very genuine people,
Mhm.
and they wouldn't be saying things to me unless it came from a place of caring. I think like they're not manipulative,
Right.
they're not whatever.
It's not actually a shot, it's a,
It's like I'm saying this because I care and I want, like when my mom makes a shot,
yeah,
it's really her own way of saying like I want you here.
yeah,
It's not coming from a place of like I'm doing this to piss you off,
right,
right? So I think I realized in that my brain quickly, because there's some people in your life, maybe acquaintances or friends or even maybe family members, that when they say things it's like you're just doing that to be an a-hole, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
right?
We all have those people in
Yeah,
our lives.
yeah.
Certainly do.
But I think, between my wife and my mom, they're such nice, genuine people that I know when they say things, it's coming from a place of like, they truly are tired. They can't, or they truly are wanting me there. And that's why they're showing their, they might not be showing it the right way to me, and it makes me a bit anger and then guilt and then blah. They could maybe do a better job,
Mhm.
but so could I, right? Like,
Yeah,
I guess I got too many thoughts running through my head when it happens, and I think I need to start labeling some of them.
yeah, and we're gonna talk about strategies, that
Yeah.
we're gonna use to sort of help you work through this stuff, and
Mhm.
labeling and understanding where these things come from are very important. And one thing that I'd like to look at too as a question is, as you feel these feelings that you have labeled, and you've done a really good job of that, you seem really in tune with yourself, which is great. It helps sort of the whole process. What types of changes have you made? Because you said that initially that you buried it, but now you don't.
Mm.
What types of changes have you made so that you're not holding on to the anger quite as much, even though it's probably still there, or it is still there?
I think probably the biggest change is just taking some accountability in the decisions I have made,
Mhm.
I guess, right? Like at the beginning, like my wife and I first started a relationship based on the fact that like she knew me for a few months, and within that few months I got a job in Alberta,
Mhm.
and she decided to move with me.
Wow.
So we didn't know each other very long, and she just took so we stayed out there 5 years together, and then we came back and moved to her hometown. So it always felt like this trade of like, you came out there for me,
Right.
and now we're coming home, and now I'm doing this for you.
Right. Okay.
So that's how it felt at the beginning, right? Like we're trading this time back and forth of like, I'm doing this for you, now we'll do it for me. But now it's coming to a place where we feel like we've purchased a house, and we're in a place that we might want to be for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not this 5-year trade-off anymore.
Right.
So I've started to take some accountability. It's like, I'm part of this decision-making process. Like I can't be resentful at my wife for a decision that we should be making together,
Okay.
right? Like there wasn't one point in the whole process of buying this house where I said, I don't want to do this, right?
Right.
And in my gut, I knew that I wanted to do it. I did have some guilt for not being close to my family, but at the same time, like when I thought about having our own family and all this, I wanted that to be in the valley, right? So I knew what was best for me long term was where my wife wanted to be, because I knew based on resources and family and just it's a beautiful spot to live,
Mm-hmm.
versus where I grew up was good.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm going to bring a family into the world, this new experience I'm having with the valley is where I want to be, right? So there was that guilt aspect of like, I want something different than what my parents had given me,
Okay.
which was kind of a hard thing to do, because of course there was houses popping up around their house, and
Yes.
it's a very, they were probably secretly hoping we might change our mind or whatever. So, yeah, I guess it's just been a tough process
Well, it
wrap
seems
it
like
up.
you have there's a lot of assumptions that you're going through and thinking, which is not a bad thing.
Mhm.
Sort of, but do my parents really feel that badly about it? And
Mm.
something you potentially look into talking to them about, or at least alleviating some of the stress you have if they're open to that type of thing.
Mhm.
And you sort of almost have a conflict within your reasoning, like my gut versus my logical self.
Mhm.
My gut says maybe that yes, this is a good idea, but logically, this definitely is a good idea.
Mhm.
And looking at how your wife thinks about things certainly might be a little bit different than that.
Mhm.
And sort of the idea of when you arrived, was this a long-term thought, or was this a sort of an idea of something that might be only 5 years?
Yeah.
And perception is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Now you talked about your work, and so on, and so you have a degree in education. Have you worked at anything beyond that, or is that as high as you were happy to go?
Yeah, I got a Bachelor of Ed from Acadia, and then I did take a master's in inclusive education as well. So,
Okay.
and I've applied that to be as a learning center teacher.
Right, and that's that job we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so, how did you find that process? Was that difficult to get the education, or did you find it easy?
It was definitely different. My BED was all in person, and that's very much who I try to be, an extrovert and talk things through. And then when I did my inclusive ed, it was during COVID.
Oh, okay.
So it was all very kind of secluded in your own little bubble, and there were supposed to be 2 or 3 of the courses that were supposed to be in person in the normal world, but of course they were Zoom courses, so that added a bit of like kind of a let down to the process, because I did wait 6 or 7 years to go back to school after completing my BED, so I was kind of looking forward to that in-person part of it again. Yeah, so I'm going to be taking a new master's now to do some counseling, hopefully. So,
Okay.
And that's all in person as well. So, and that's another aspect of this is like I've never been engaged in counseling before either. So, just kind of learning the process of what it means to be counseled.
Well, as they've probably said to you before, and you can't be a counselor unless you've been counseled. So
Yeah.
you're doing, if nothing else, you're doing your homework.
Yes.
So when you were, and we went over your intake forms last day too, and you said that you're a pretty an extroverted person, and you're kind of a person that likes to be with people, and certainly that your job and so on has done that. But then COVID happened. How did COVID affect you? Did you find that was something that could have intensified these feelings of family and
Being away?
Yeah, being away, exactly. Just maybe any resentment or anger around that.
I think it was hard. Yeah, it definitely made it harder. Going up to see my parents and such like that. And my grandmother was still alive at the time, and she was kind of going through some early signs of dementia and things, and then going up to see her and only being able to talk to her. She would stay on the patio and I'd be on the front lawn, kind of doing that. And just like, she'd break your heart with like comments like she thought my mom was making up COVID and she took as a way to like not let her go anywhere type of thing. So it was very hard on my family, and the fact that I couldn't be there to help my mom with my grandmother, and my dad just kind of like, he's kind of like me, he just kind of goes with the flow. And I just think about my dad, like how hard it must be to have your mother-in-law live with you for 30 years. And now that I have a better understanding of that, now that I'm married, and now that, like, I think about, like, he was 30 years old when his mother-in-law moved in with him, right? Like, that's almost equivalent to me now, right? Like, my mother-in-law is moving in with me now for the next 30 years of my life, and just, that came kind of full picture when my grandmother started to get sick, that, what that must be like for them, not knowing how to kind of live in that world. And then COVID kind of came in and totally changed everybody's world around. So it did bring up kind of more guilt and more, but it almost felt like as a province, as a country, as a world, like you kind of lived with it because it felt like we were all in the same boat, right? Like as much as it hurt you as a person, it's just like you felt like you weren't the only one, I guess. So we kind of survived through that a little bit, or that's what I kept telling myself, right?
Yeah.
You know, there had people in nursing homes that they could only talk to through a window, right? Like, so you kind of always compared yourself to others and say, oh, it could be worse, could be worse. And I think that's how I survived through COVID and not seeing my family. It's like it could always be worse,
Yeah.
which was a healthy coping strategy in the moment, but now that we've kind of flipped on the other side of COVID a little bit, and the fact that, you know, I could go see my family now, we don't have those restrictions, and it's not happening as much as I would like to. It's just, COVID was almost like a safety net of like, well, we can't, right? we can't come see you. And that's
guilt involved.
No, not really any guilt involved, right? Like it was normal to FaceTime, it was normal to do all these things. But now that everything's kind of lifted and we're living that world now, and you don't go as much as you should. So yeah, COVID was a kind of a bit of a reality check in a way of like, this is how you're not supposed to live. Here's what you could easily blame things on, and now we don't have that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said two things that are quite interesting. One, you talked about your dad for 30 years, and then you talked about should, how much we should go.
Yeah.
Where do you think that should comes from?
I think it's like family values, and also the should of like, I'm the only one. Like I think if I had a brother or sister that was able to help or contribute or be there or live in the same community as them, I wouldn't feel as much guilt as them having no son or daughter to lean on or talk to, I guess.
So do you figure in your thought process that is a big component? You being an only child, is that
I think
add
so.
to?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So if you did have a brother or sister, because where does the should come from in the sense that you don't have a brother or sister? If you weren't there, if they had no children, would they be able to continue and survive?
Yeah.
So where do you think that should comes from?
I think it's my perception of their expectations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your perception, their expectation. Okay. And would you consider that significant to house this wife anger?
Yeah.
A major component of this?
It's probably the aspect of it, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And how do you think you would deal with that?
I don't know, I think I just always compare it to like my dad is very close with his parents. Like he decided to live very close to them, bought a cottage close to them. They hang out every weekend still currently. So it's like...
And that's his family or your mother's family?
That's his family. So it's like my mom and my dad both stayed close to home, both stayed close to their parents.
Okay.
And now I've been kind of the outlier of that. And
Of the three?
Of the three, yeah. Not much to compare to in our little family, but of the three, of the norms of our small family.
The norms of your small family, right?
Yeah. And even before that, the norms were very much like you think of the olden days, like even with my family, like my grandmother grew up in a home of 11 kids. She was the only one that stayed in the house till she was 30 to help look after her parents and her brothers on the farm, and didn't move out and get married till she was in her early 30s, which was very rare back then.
Yeah.
Like
30 was old.
30 was old.
Yeah.
Right. So even her showing commitment in the 1930s and 40s has kind of just been a thing within our family, that you stay close to your parents. That's what you do.
So
right?
culturally, this is something that you are sort of pushing back against in your family.
Yeah.
And it would not be considered normal.
Right.
For cousins as well? Is there cousins, aunts, uncles, all fairly close, or geographically, or would they have some of them?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I don't have many cousins either, because my dad has 2 sisters and my mom only has 1 sister. And I think of the majority of my cousins, like one lives in Cape Breton, which is a 5-hour drive
Yeah.
away. Two of them live in Alberta. But I guess they all have a sibling that stayed close though, right?
Oh.
Like they all,
The sibling you don't have.
exactly. They all have at least one sibling that stayed very close, actually, now that I think about it. Yeah.
And so there's this sense of cultural family obligation
Mm-hmm.
that sort of this pressure you're putting on yourself
Mm-hmm.
that you're not sure is 100% legitimate,
Right.
but you certainly feel as it
Yeah.
is legitimate, and
Yeah.
it feels sort of to the point where monthly there's a situation where you, who, as we've talked earlier, very calm demeanor, pretty,
Yeah.
I think you described yourself as someone with ice water sort of running through
Yeah.
your veins as far as cool, collected, but this does certainly might be the only thing that makes you angry.
Yeah. Like it irks me. I don't even know what that,
Yeah.
people use that, just irks me a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming close to the end of our session, and we certainly have talked about sort of review what your reasons for being here are. A lot about you, and which is fantastic to help me sort of who your family is, what the main issue is, and how that is structured into an irk, for lack of better terms,
Mm-hmm.
and culturally who you are, what your perspectives and so on are, what is causing you stress currently, a bit of work, a bit of life, but mostly this one thing.
Geography.
Yeah, and and then we can, you talk about some coping strategies you had, and hopefully we can add to that,
Mhm.
as well as that you seem to be doing okay, you're functioning, but that you kind of like to have this thing just removed, and if we could get you a little more happy. So I'm gonna try to get you in for same time next week,
Okay.
and I'll send you an email before I do, and we can make sure we get that cataloged and
Sounds good.
organized.
Thank you.
All right.